Nobody could probably introduce Raj better than Bob, and he's already given a fantastic precursor to his background. But Raj is a founding member of the Conscious Capitalism movement. He's a prolific publisher, known by some as an intellectual shaman. I'm not sure whether or not he appreciates that labeling. But he's definitely on a mission to bring caring and humanity into business, and it's my honor to introduce him now.
Thank you. Thank you. It's always a pleasure to share a stage with Bob, one of the great heroes of mine in terms of leadership and as a human being. I'm going to share with you a quick overview of conscious capitalism. Some of you may have heard the term, you may vaguely know what it's about, but I was asked to provide sort of a primer into that. So the subtitle of our book, Conscious Capitalism, was Liberating the Heroic Spirit of Business, which I think is still true. You know, businesses have done so much. Right? All of the things we take for granted really were created by businesses. They've really evolved human society in a significant way, and entrepreneurs are the heroes of our world in many ways. But also, I believe we need to look at the awakening, the healing and caring side of business. This is what we've left out, right? We made business all about the head and the wallet. We left out the human being in between. And that's really what's the missing piece there. And I love the metaphor of the caterpillar becoming a butterfly. Right? Nature gives us beautiful metaphors for everything that we need to embody in this world. And the caterpillar exists at one level, which is only about consumption and growing too many times. And then nature turns on that magical switch and the imaginal cells. It enters that intermediate phase of metamorphosis and then emerges as this creature of light and beauty. That not only spreads light and beauty, which is worthwhile in itself, but it also enables the flourishing of life around it. Right? So here's the same creature able to exist at two levels. Right? Now, it doesn't have a choice. It doesn't wake up one day and say, what kind of an empty life am I living? All I'm doing is consuming. Right? But for us as human beings, we have to make that choice. We can choose to live at a caterpillar level, and we can actually choose to have companies that operate at that level, or we can rise to that higher level of being creatures of light and beauty and spreading flourishing in the world. So capitalism as a system has done a lot. So I think that's something that we need to recognize and appreciate what's happened in the last 200 years. Per capita incomes have risen 3,000% after being flat for millennia. 90% of humanity lived in extreme abject poverty. Now it's below 9%. Literacy went from 14 to 88%. Our human population went from 1 billion to 8 billion. Many, many things have happened as a consequence of the spread of free markets and free people. Right? This is really done with a higher level of freedom that people enjoyed as a result of that. But we know that we're also living at a time when there's a high degree of cynicism and disconnect. Bob talked about some of the data on that, right? The level of confidence that people have. 86% of Americans don't trust big business. Bob shared this statistic, right? Most people think the company doesn't really see them as a human being. Surprisingly, even before the pandemic, when we were at a time of economic boom in the richest country in the world, 40% of Americans had less than $400 in the bank. If they had a small emergency, your car breaks down, your heating system, they would not be able to survive those kinds of little potholes in life. People are living with a level of financial uncertainty and stress that is really quite extreme, and they could not come up with 2030 days. And we've seen the data on income inequality, right? US far worse than Europe, although the trends are negative in most places. You look at Latin America, over the last 10 years, we've seen now a reversal in many ways of this reducing of poverty. It's actually in most countries in South America, poverty has actually gone up in the last 10 years. So there's something going on that's not working very well. So I would say traditional American-style capitalism isn't working well for ordinary people and the planet. American-style capitalism I define as short-term oriented and very, very financially focused, right? And so what I conclude from this is we need to celebrate capitalism, recognize what it is and what it has given us, but we also need to elevate it with higher consciousness. Our journey of existing on this planet is one of continually waking up to higher states of consciousness. And we've applied that in many parts of our lives, but we haven't applied that into business and capitalism. And if you don't do this, we will decimate it. There's no guarantee that once you have this operating system in place that it remains, right? We've seen many examples, Venezuela being a recent one, and you're starting to see now the warning signs of this all over the world, especially in South America. right? Whether it's Chile or Colombia, there's riots, there's people, there's economic suffering is really very intense. We talk about the inequality dimension, right? That is becoming extreme. And so this revolutionary energy is out there unless we do something to change and elevate capitalism. So I believe we need to rethink everything about this. Why do we exist as a business and as leaders? What do we do? How do we do it? Who are we as leaders? How do we define success? What's our time horizon? We need new answers to all of these questions, and that's where conscious capitalism comes in. We have 4 fundamental why, what, who, and how of business, and we need new answers to each of those. And the way we think about it is in terms of the why, we need a higher purpose. Every one of us in this room should have our own higher purpose. I'm sure most of you do. It's not just to make money and and then retire and die. It's to do something meaningful, right? Same thing for companies. There should be a higher purpose. What do we do is about creating wealth for owners as opposed to creating value of multiple kinds for all stakeholders. Who are we as leaders? We deliver the numbers, we get the stock price versus we take people to a better place. We have an impact on the lives and the well-being of people. And how does it feel to work here? It's all about stress and burnout, right? And KPIs and so forth, as opposed to being in a place where you feel trusted and you experience joy at work, right? So for each of these, I have this thing about acronyms, right? I make acronyms for everything. So for purpose, it's healing. Why healing? Because there's a lot of suffering in the world. And can our organization and can we as humans be part of alleviating that suffering and bringing more joy into the world? It doesn't matter what we do. You can frame it in those terms. Doesn't matter what your profession is. Are we reducing suffering? Are we bringing more joy? And are we enabling healthy growth? And then it stands for the qualities of a great purpose. It's heroic, it's evolving, it's aligning, it's loving, inspiring, natural, and galvanizing. For this one, it's society, partners, investors, customers, employees, and the environment. Those are the key stakeholders, starting with society. We have to be on the right side of society. For leaders, we use the acronym SELFLESS. You cannot be a selfish human being and call yourself a leader. That means you're going to look at all the people you lead and say, oh, I can use all these people to achieve my personal goals, which are usually rooted in the ego, right? Power and money and so forth. That's not a leader. That's the definition of a tyrant. A true leader has transcended that narrow self. They're about the collective self, right? They've gone to self-transcendence, as Viktor Frankl talked about. Then it stands for the qualities. You have to be strong, right? Enthusiastic. You have to be loving. Strength without love is tyranny. Love without strength is ineffective. You have to be strong and loving to be a leader. Martin Luther King said we must be tough-minded and tender-hearted at the same time. It's not one or the other. And then you have to have flexibility, long-term orientation, and emotional, spiritual, and systems intelligence. And all of those can be cultivated. Your IQ, you're kind of born with. You can't do a lot about it. But those other forms of intelligence can all be grown, and they ultimately matter more. And then the cultures, tactile. You can really feel a conscious culture when you walk into it. It stands for the qualities: trust, authenticity, caring, etc. So ultimately, it boils down to this question: can you build a business on love and care? The founders of Whole Foods actually asked this question. They said, we look around our friends who work at companies, they're all miserable and burned out, right? All the time. Most businesses run on a lot of fear and stress. We use this metaphor of carrots and sticks as a way of getting people to do what we want them to do. Well, what animal belongs between a carrot and a stick? It's a jackass. It's not a human being, right? And yet somehow that's what, people have to be motivated from the inside. So can we build businesses that actually are operating on love and care? And Bob mentioned these statistics earlier. I think it's the saddest statistic that I've come across. Heart attacks 20% higher on Mondays. 4 a.m. Monday morning is the peak of heart attacks. Now, it's interesting. I go around the world speaking, and when I put that slide up, inevitably there are people in the room that start laughing. It didn't happen so much here. Some people kind of smiled. And I said, that's an odd reaction when I put up. I said, I think you're laughing because you cannot cry. Because that's really what you want to do. Right? Our work is literally killing us. It doesn't have to be that way. Bob mentioned Jeffrey Pfeffer's study on how many Americans die. This one also is shocking that 600,000 Chinese die from overwork every year. Too much work. When you're working 6 days a week, 14 hours a day, right? Ultimately, that there's a price to be paid. So the human cost of doing business is probably the largest cost there is. It doesn't show up on the income statement or balance sheet. You buy a product that's so cheap, you say, wow, how could I get it for this much? Well, there's a lot of unaccounted for human suffering in there. So as Freud said, love and work are the cornerstones of our humanness. This is what it means to be human. We're the only species we work even if you don't have to. Bob doesn't have to run around 6 days a week. I was with him in Europe one time. It was 6 a.m. until midnight every day, okay, for 8 days. visiting. He mentioned 130 companies. Bob has never sold a single company. He's bought 130 of them. And I said, Bob, don't you have enough? You've got 26 children and grandchildren. Why aren't you just enjoying and golfing and having fun? He said, I don't know how much time I have, and on my deathbed, I will not be proud of the machines we built and the money we made. I will be proud of the lives we touched. And I said, Bob, you're not growing a business, you're spreading a healing ministry. Because the more that company grows, the better life gets for more people. And that's not true of many other businesses, okay? There are businesses, the more they grow, the more they spread misery. 3G Capital out of Brazil, every time they acquired Kraft, 20,000 layoffs, right? Everybody else is put on these incredible targets. Stress and burnout happens. So love and work define us as human beings. And my question always was, why can't we combine these two things? Why do we have to check our humanity at the door, and love is what you do in your personal life, and here you show up and you put on your mask and armor and go to battle and defeat the competition and capture market share? And there's a whole militaristic way that we think about business. As Khalil Gibran said, work is love made visible. If we do meaningful work, it's a way of us expressing our love into the world. And so this was the foundation for me when I wrote a book called Firms of Endearment in 2007. I was frustrated with business as usual. I was always asking, is there a better way? And I've realized the answer to that question is always yes. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. There is a better way. So is there a better way to think about business and marketing? And hence the title. I discovered companies that were loved by everybody. Customers, employees, etc. And we uncovered those 4 principles of conscious capitalism through that research. And then we did the financial analysis at the end. You say, how do these companies perform? They're paying their people better, like Costco paying double of Walmart. They're investing in their customer experience, providing better benefits, paying their suppliers well, investing in their communities, investing in the environment, and paying taxes at a higher rate. I said, maybe investors get mediocre or okay returns, not exceptional. What we actually found was that these companies outperformed the market 9-1 in the original set of companies. In the second edition, it was almost 8-1. They dramatically outperform, even though they're not trying to maximize profits, they are far more profitable. And profits are important, right? People say conscious capitalism, oh, you guys don't care about profits. No, profits are very important. Without profits, society doesn't work. Governments don't create wealth. They can only tax and spend the wealth generated by businesses. We don't have functioning societies without corporate profits. It is socially irresponsible not to be profitable, to use all that capital and not generate returns for society. So these are very, very profitable companies, but it matters how you make the money. Matters a great deal, because you can make the money by squeezing your people and squeezing your suppliers and damaging the environment and externalizing all kinds of real costs of your business, or you can actually simultaneously create multiple kinds of well-being for all your stakeholders: financial, intellectual breakthroughs, right? Social well-being, emotional well-being, operating from love and care, not fear and stress, spiritual well-being, having meaning and purpose in my life through my work, the impact on the culture. $1.4 trillion we spend on marketing in this country. That defines the culture in many negative ways, for the most part. Eating disorders and body dysmorphia for young women when we use women's bodies to sell products, for example. The impact on our physical well-being and the impact on nature. These are all the consequences of how we operate. And a conscious business seeks to have a positive impact in all these areas, a truly conscious business. And a traditional business says we're all about maximizing profit, and therefore everything else is a side effect. Well, I'm sorry, there's nothing on this planet called a side effect, okay? Somebody's using that language, you mean they're trying to hide something. They don't want to deal with that, so it's a side effect, right? We do things and there are effects. And just because you put it in fine print or say it fast, at the end of the ads that come for medicines and during the evening news, people frolicking in the meadows, and then, if you take this, it's going to kill you, right? All the side effects. There's nothing called a side effect. Can we do business with a spectrum of positive effects? It does exist, so we know it's possible, right? It takes intentionality and it takes creativity. And that's the one thing that is unlimited on this planet, is human ingenuity and human creativity. When human beings feel safe and they're aligned with purpose and they're, part of an organization that really cares, they can do extraordinary things. So this kind of captures the sense of disconnection, the sense of complacency, otherness that we've had in the world, right? Everybody in this room, we're part of the fortunate people on this planet. There are billions of people still struggling to survive, right? 3 billion people still living on less than $5 a day. And the reality is that we are all in the same boat. This planet is one system, right? Humanity is one spirit. We're all interconnected. Our well-being, the climate change, pandemic, all these things are showing us. as if we needed a reminder that we are all interconnected and interdependent. We have to start making decisions rooted in that realization. So for me, this journey started in 2005, and I started working on the book that became Firms of Endearment. So the more I study it, the more I come across exemplars like Bob and Barry Wehmiller, I realize it works, and it works for everybody, and that's important. It has to work for everybody. And why does it work? In the beginning, I said, there must be a mistake. How can these companies be so successful financially while they're doing all this other stuff, right? Are they printing money in the basement, right? What's going on here? And ultimately, we realized, no, actually, these are, in pure business terms, they just work well. Sales per employee, right? Sales per square foot, much higher. Sales growth, positive word of mouth. Gross margins lower, but net margins higher. Why? You pay your people well, pay your suppliers well, your gross margins go down. But then you save money on marketing, you save money on employee turnover, you save money on legal costs, you save money on administrative costs. You don't have a lot of managers telling people what to do. People are self-organizing, self-managing, and self-motivating in organizations like this. Much more resilience in tough times, and a commitment to inclusive flourishing, right? So I believe the case for conscious capitalism is not just a business case. It starts with a societal case. This is something that is imperative for society. There's a planetary case, there's a human case, and there's a business case. I don't like to lead with the business case, because that is something too often is like, if it doesn't have a business case, we don't do it. No, if there's a human case, you should still do it. If there's a planetary case, still do it. Not everything has to have it. In this case, it does have all of these elements together. I don't see any reason why one would not operate. How do you make the opposite case of this? No, nobody should have purpose. You should not have, it's kind of hard. And yet that's the world we've been in, right? Where the opposite has been what people have accepted. So ultimately, this is about doing business where everybody matters and everybody wins in the long term. If somebody in our system is not thriving in the long term, that means we haven't really arrived at the right way to do things. We have to go back and fix that. Right? Everybody connected to our business ultimately has to win. Thank you very much. I'm sorry. It's my great pleasure to introduce Ernie Cadot and Bindu Agrawal. So Ernie is a longtime professor at the University of Tennessee, and years ago when we first started Conscious Capitalism, I reached out to Ernie because he had developed all these simulations over the years. He has a very successful company developing market simulations, right? Business to teach business students. And I said, I'd love it if we could develop a Conscious Capitalism simulation. And so from that was born the Marketplace Conscious Capitalism Simulation, which is now used all over the world. And Bindu has been working with Ernie as well. She was also a professor in India. So they're going to share a little bit about the Conscious Capitalism Simulation. Please.